Hi everybody. How many people do we have right now? 20. Okay. So for the people that have just joined us, I'd like to just say we'll be starting in just 1 or 2 minutes. I want to give everybody just a little bit more time to come into the Twitch stream. Say what? Hey, hello. So it's nice when somebody says hi, otherwise it's really quiet. It's getting a bit more caffeine. It's going to be a good workshop today. Okay, 12 o'clock. So that means we're going to officially start. So I'd like to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Andrew. My name's also Mark. I'm a software developer at Undev Studios. We're the creators of Cables GL, which is a program which allows you to make really awesome 3D content inside of your web browser, to say it simply. So I'm going to assume that people don't know anything about graphical programming, real-time graphics, web technology. I'm just going to assume it's a blank slate, and I'm going to go from there. I'd like to ask you to ask any questions in the chat stream if you're not following what I'm saying. 2 other software developers from Undev, Panda and Steam, they're moderating the chat as well, so they'll be there to answer any questions if I miss it or I don't catch it. We're going to do our best today with the 3 of us to make sure that this workshop gives you a good introduction into what Cables GL is. So, without further ado, let's get started. The first thing we need to do is to make sure, if you want to follow this workshop, that you are registered. So if you head over to Cables GL, you can see here in the top right corner a register button. So if you click that, you're going to have to register if you want to follow this workshop. Hopefully you already got the email or the message from Jonas, which already asked you to do this. I'm going to give everybody 5 minutes to get this done. For the people that already did this, I'd just like to point out you can go to this area here, and a lot of these patches are interactive. So what you're actually looking at here is something that was created in Cables GL. So if you use these arrows here, you can click and you can go from one patch to another. With a lot of them, you can click and drag with your mouse and use the mouse wheel and zoom in and out. And while we're just giving it a few minutes for everybody to get registered, then this is a nice way to see some of the things that can be done with cables. Cables is really sweet. Would there be an offline standalone version? Well, it's a question we get a lot. I'm not going to go too in-depth into it right now because there's going to be an FAQ at the end of the workshop. Basically, one of the most powerful things of Cables is that it is online. And I think during this workshop, you're going to see why you want it to be online. We are currently working on a standalone player, which would allow you to get a Cables patch and then be able to run it on a local computer without having an internet connection. But let's just save those kind of questions for the end of the workshop. But great that you're asking questions. Okay, so as you can see here, I'm scrolling through some Cables patches, and we just made what we thought was a nice selection here, which just shows some stuff that can be made. If anybody's got any problems registering, I'd like you to go into the Twitch chat and send a message, write something out to Panda. He's going to be able to make sure if you've got any problems registering or authenticating your account, then we can fix that like right now on the spot. You know, maybe 5 minutes is too long. Maybe everybody already registered because it's awfully quiet over there. Is there anybody that isn't registered right now? If so, could you please put something in the chat? If I don't get anything back off anybody in 1 minute, then I'm going to be continuing with the rest of the workshop. Because if everybody has registered, there's no point in you all waiting. Hey Sander, yeah, thanks. That's one of the best parts about cables. It's a visual node programming environment which runs completely in a browser, so there's no installation necessary, and you can work on it from any computer, basically. I will go more into that later. Okay, so I'm going to assume that everybody's registered now. If not, now is the time to say it. Okay, so I'd like to say a little about Undev first. So let me just close this off. So I'm going to go here to our webpage, undev.studio. We're a software development studio that developed and created cables. What is cables? Cables GL. Well, what you're looking at there is a little video that's showing what we call a node programming environment. It's a visual programming environment. So the difference between this and code is code, you have to type out a lot of stuff to get a cube on the screen and maybe some other awesome graphics. And a lot of people don't know how to code. So when you use a visual programming environment like cables, we use these objects here that you see called nodes, and they have input and output. And by connecting these together, people can quickly create interactive 3D content without having to type a line of code, basically. So what this means is we wanted to create a program which allows people to create awesome visuals without having to type a line of code, basically. So all of these ops, they're actually all pieces of code which are all designed to work together. And you, as the user, you just put these together and you create awesome stuff with it, which is what we're going to be doing today with cables. So this is the webpage of our studio. We're situated in Berlin and Cologne. We use Cables GL on a variety of web projects for different clients, which could range from energy companies to Nike. The scope of what we do is really huge and vast. You know, if you want to see a lot of what we do, then I'd advise you to go to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, or come to the actual Cables GL webpage. I'm going to show that in a minute with the Made with Cables page. But I just wanted to give you an idea of who we are and what we do. So Cables is pretty much inspired by some other tools like VVVVV, and there's also other node programming environments out of there, but we're the only one that have it web-based, basically, in this format. So as you can see, there's a huge amount of different things that you can make with cables. It's like any program. It gives you a toolbox, it gives you a set of modules, and it's up to you as the creator to come up with what you want to make, basically. So this is our studio, and we have information about ourselves there. We have projects and other stuff. You can just check that out. So I'm going to just close this off right now. So hopefully everybody's registered. So you should now be here on this screen, the welcome screen, if you've logged in. So this can be sometimes a little bit overwhelming if you've never done this stuff before. Basically, your cables patches are stored online, and we're going to open one in the next 2 minutes, and we're going to just start making something. But I just wanted to explain a little bit about the web page first. So here we have the web page, and we have different sections at the top. Like Explore, you can see top patches, latest patches, the Made with Cables, basic example patches. Actually, let's just check this one now, Made with Cables. Here we go. So look, I click that and I go over here, and now we see some really cool real-world projects that have been made with cables. There'll be links to the cables patch so you can watch it real time, or to the YouTube video. And as you can see, we've got like quite a lot of different things there that have been done. And this is kind of like what we've created ourselves. If it's creatively to make something like a demo for the demo scene or for an actual client, that's all here. And there's also a huge amount of content that's being created by our users and the community, but more about that later. So we have a YouTube channel as well. That's something I want to make clear. By the end of this workshop, if you're still interested in cables and you want to continue, we've got a huge amount of video tutorials aimed at complete beginner to intermediate and expert levels. And we release pretty much almost every week or two a new tutorial video. So if you want to see later on some really amazing stuff made with cables, you can go here. So like this one, for example, it's a favorite of mine, so I'm just going to show it. So what you're going to see now, this was made with cables. So Convergence LA is an assignment that we got for an artist, Riffic. I have the sound disabled right now. Can I enable that? There we go. Hopefully that's not too loud. It's the first time I'm sharing the desktop audio. So basically what you're looking at here is real-time Twitter data, which is being accessed via the Twitter API for LA. So we can use the mouse wheel and we can zoom in. And now we can start looking at this interactive 3D map. So these little lines that you see there, they're actually a tweet being sent from one location to another, like a direct message. And we can see by the amount of blue dots the amount of activity on Twitter. We have keywords that are coming out here. And if we scroll in, you can see basically the Twitter activity for the city. And if we go in here, this is like a 3D abstract visualization of this data. So this is one of the many things that's been created with Cables GL. It's like anything, you know, at the beginning you've got to start small, but you can work your way up to make amazing things if you want to. So I'm going to just close this off. So we have a huge amount of things that you can look at here that have been made with Cables. I could sit down for a few hours and still not cover all this. So what is Cables? Let's find out by just making something, shall we? So what I want you to do is, if you're on this page, I want you to go to Create, and I want you to click Empty Project. Now, when you click this, what happens is you create a new empty project inside of Cables. So I'm going to press F11 and go into full screen. Okay. So I'd like to keep the chatter right now in the chat room about the actual workshop itself, discussing other things. Let's try and keep that to the end of the workshop, because I just want to stay focused and give everybody their full attention regarding what we're going to do here. So as you can see, it says in the bottom left corner, this patch is empty. Press Escape to add operators. So we press Escape to add something to Cables. So we press Escape. This menu appears. Now, this menu is your interface. This is how you add ops to Cables. What's an op? Let's get to that in a moment. So right now, the first thing we want to do is we want to type in main loop. So as you can see, I've not even typed in the entire word, and these matches start to come up. So I'm going to type in main loop. This is the most essential thing in any Cables patch, and I'll explain why in a moment. So you can either press Enter or you can click the Add button. So I'm going to click Add. This now gets added to the patch. Now let's learn for a moment how to navigate around the patch. If we use the mouse wheel, we can zoom in and out. And the interesting thing is you will zoom into where your cursor is. So if I put the cursor here and zoom in, I zoom there. If I put it here and press zoom, I zoom there. So if I click and hold the right mouse button, this hand icon appears and I can move around the patch. You can also hold the space key, click the left mouse button and move around. So I'm going to zoom out a bit. So we're going to start really simple right now. We're going to put a cube on the screen. We're going to figure out how to rotate it and how to apply a material to it. Nice and simple. So what happens is we have 2 to 3 things here that we can do with creating things with Cables. So I could go here now and I could press Escape, and I could type in cube and press Enter. And this allows me to create a cube mesh, but I don't see a cube on the screen right now. Why is this? Well, we need to connect things to each other to make them work, basically. So what main loop is doing is it's triggering all of the ops that's connected to, but as you can see, nothing's connected right now. So if you hover with your mouse over one of these ports, you can see that you start to get information about them. So the yellow port, that's the one we're interested in now, that's called a trigger. And the trigger basically means do what you do. When an op gets a trigger, it does what it's meant to do. So a cube is meant to show a cube. So we click with the left mouse button and we drag this out. Now, as you can see, I now get this cable, okay? And there's a plus icon. We'll use that again in a moment. You click and you drag that over here, and you can see it's highlighted now in white. Let's just zoom in a touch, okay? If I now let go of this, we render the cube. So now we have a cube on the screen, okay? Now, basically, if we now right-click with the mouse here, we disconnect this, and then the cube is gone. So I'm going to reconnect this. Okay. So I'm now going to click in the patch, and I'm going to press the F key. Now, when you press the F key, you go into flow mode, and flow mode is really good because it's a visual programming environment, right? You know, you're not working with code, you're working with ops, you're working with blocks. It's kind of like complicated advanced Lego. So when we press F for flow mode, we can see the flow of the data, basically. So I'm going to press F again, and we're going to be using that a lot during this workshop. So I have this cube, but I can't do anything with it, right? So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to click this circle. Now, if I click this circle, this is a way of saying to cables, I want to add an op here, and I want to plug it in between this connection. So I'm going to click this. And then I want you to type in transform. Now, transform is the term that we use to be able to move, rotate, and scale an object in 3D space. Okay? So, for an example, I have my phone. And I want to transform its position. I want to move it around. I want to move it closer. I want to be able to rotate it. So to do that in cables, we use the transform op. Now, if I want to move an op, you can just click, drag, and then you can move it around like this to create some space. So I'm going to make just a little bit of space here now. So I want to rotate this cube. So watch this. If I click somewhere in the patch, this part here is empty. If I click an op, all of a sudden all of this pops up. These are the parameters for the op. So this is my way of controlling the op that I've clicked on. So here we have position X, Y, and Z. So if you look here, we have red, green, and blue dots, and here we have red, green, and blue. So if I'm now going to click and drag with the mouse button, so I click and hold the mouse button in and move it left and right, as you can see, I can now move the cube. Okay? Now, if I click inside of the field and I press 0, I change the input. So I can double click, type in 2, and it'll pop over there. I can click and drag and move this over here. So I just want you to just try this for a moment. So you can play around with the position. We can move it closer, further away. And here we have rotation. So if I'm going to rotate this now, we can rotate the cube. It looks a little bit funny because we don't have any shading or material. Don't worry about that. Just try tweaking a few parameters just for a moment, just to get the hang of it. Oh yeah, and one other thing that you can do is, so if you click a transform op, this is what we call a gizmo. A gizmo allows you to interact with a 3D object in 2D space because your screen is 2D. So if I click and hold the red part of the gizmo now, I can move it left and right. If I click this, I can move it up and down. And as you can see, the UI here updates accordingly. So now what I want to do is I want to make this cube rotate. Really simple thing. So to make things rotate, we need a number which continuously increases. And for this, we have time, basically. So I'm going to click in the patch, I'm going to press escape, and I'm going to type in timer. And this is a timer that can be started, paused, and reset by triggering. So I'm going to add it. Okay, so now if we look at the timer up, it doesn't have a trigger output, okay? It has this. So if we hold the mouse cursor over the output port, we can see this number is slowly incrementing, it's going up. This is just starting the time. If I click reset, as you can see here, it goes back to 0. So I'm going to get this now, and I'm going to plug it into rotation X. Now, we don't see a whole lot going on because it's rotating really slowly. So we're going to go to the speed of the timer here, and I'm going to put it on, say, 8. And as we can see, this is now rotating the cube. So I could get the output of this, and I could connect it to more than one input port. So I'm going to click with the left mouse button and hold it in, and I'm going to drag to this, rotate Y, and I'm going to let go. And now we're rotating it on 2 axes. So we've already, with a very few ups on the screen, we're starting to create like a basic animation, okay? So this is where you can start to go absolutely crazy if you know your way a little bit around the cables ecosystem, but we're going to keep it simple today. Let's now say that I would want it to rotate at a different speed on the y-axis, okay? I could create a second timer and plug that in, but what I could also do is click here in between and grab the multiply up, so it's just basic multiplication. I'm going to press enter. And I can now multiply the output of timer by a different value. And this now means that I could make it rotate faster on the y-axis than x. I could put it on, say, 0.5, so it would rotate at half of the speed. So I'm just trying to keep this really simple so you can see the whole idea with cables, because it's a node-based programming environment, and these are nodes, these are opses. You just start plugging input and output to each other. You start transforming output, modifying it, and then plugging it back into something that needs it. But this cube still looks kind of funny. And it's gray. You know, there's no lighting, there's no shadow, because this is another basic thing. So we've created something called a mesh, and a mesh is just basically a 3D model that we can render and see on the screen. We could disconnect this cube with the right mouse button. I could drag this out now, and I could get a sphere. And we're not going to see the sphere obviously rotate because it doesn't have any hard edges. So I can click the sphere up now, and I can press the delete key. That will get rid of it. I could now pull this out, and I could think, let's grab another mesh. Let's maybe go for a rectangle. So I'm going to grab a rectangle. So this is how quick and easy it is to get one mesh and get a new one, basically. So let's just practice deleting. I'm going to click this, and I'm going to delete the rectangle. Let's reconnect that cube. So I go to the cube. I'm going to click, drag to here, and let go. One other thing I want to show you is this. Cables is pretty good at understanding where you want to plug something in. So if I now click and drag this to the middle of the op, basically Cables is going to say, hey, there's only one trigger port, right? So if you just let go here, I think I'm going to just plug it into there. So we let go and it automatically connects. And that's something else I forgot to show. So let's go here and disconnect the timer. Okay. If I'm going too fast, please say so in the chat, and I can slow it down. If anybody's falling behind, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Just say so. I'll pause. We don't want it that you get lost and you can't keep up with stuff. We've got all the time that we need. So I'm going to click and drag the output from timer, and I'm going to pull it to the middle of the op. Now, what happens is then we get a really cool radial menu appear. And this shows all of the input ports that this can be connected to. So if you look, you can see it doesn't show me the trigger because you can't connect a number to a trigger. It's a different data type, and you couldn't connect a trigger into a number. You know, data types have to match to be able to add it to be added together. So now I'm going to add this to rotate X. Click. I could pull it out, drag to the middle, and I could connect this to rotate Z. Right mouse button to disconnect. Okay. So that's the basics of interacting with the UI. There's still quite a lot more things tucked under the hood, but let's just keep it nice and simple for now. So we want to make this cube look a lot cooler because, I mean, everything starts with a cube, basically, in 3D graphics. And if you can make a cube look good, then you're already halfway there to making amazing things later on. So I'm going to click and drag, and as you can see, I get this green rectangle, and that allows me to select multiple ops. And I can now click and drag and move them over here. So I'm going to use the right mouse button, click and hold. I'm going to move up. I'm going to use the mouse wheel to zoom out a little bit, and I'm going to move this up. So now I'm going to click here in between. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add something that you need to change the color of a mesh. So in cables and 3D graphics, we normally call this a material. Okay, so a material is a way to change the color and the look of a 3D object, of a 3D mesh. Our cube is an object, sorry, it's a mesh, so we're going to apply a material to it. So if I just now type in material, you can see I get a huge amount of materials here. Material, IBL material, Fung material. Don't worry about what all this means. We're just going to keep it simple. We're going to look for the basic material right here. And it says a material without shading. So I'm going to click it. And the moment I add that, we can see that the color of the cube has changed. Okay, so what happened here? Well, basically, let's press F for flow mode. So we have a main loop, it hits basic material, and now what's happening is this material is going to get assigned to all of the meshes underneath it. If we'd have 4 cubes underneath here now, they would all become this one color. okay? So this is the important part about flow mode, and it's kind of like difficult for beginners to wrap their head around. So we create a material, and then we're gonna go down the nodes, and we're gonna assign it to anything that's underneath there that says, I need a material to be rendered. So I'm gonna press F to go out of flow mode. Just give me one moment. Just wanted to take my sweater off. It's getting kind of warm in here. Okay, so how can we change the color of this cube? So I'm going to click the basic material up, and remember, if you click an op, this here updates with the parameters of that op. So, you know, every op is different, so it's going to have different parameters, but some of them are similar to each other. So here we have RGB alpha, red, green, blue, alpha. So to define the color of a pixel, we have 4 values: red, green, blue, alpha. So by mixing red, green, and blue together, we can create different colors. So if we go here and we click and drag this, as you can see, we start to create different colors. So if I turn red and green to 0 and turn this up to 1, we have a blue cube. If I mix red and blue, we get this really nice coda color, kind of purple. If I turn the blue down now, we get red. Now another thing you can do is you can click this and you can get the color picker. So the color picker can be used just to very quickly and easily look at a color that you want and then to be able to just select it. So here we kind of pick like the mix between the color and pure white. And here on the right, we can move this up and down and we can change the color. So if I want it to be a kind of red, I can move this up here, move that there. If I want it to be a bit red-white, I can move it there. If I want it darker, I can pull this down and move it here. So I'd like you just to experiment with that just for half a minute, how you can like just change the color of this cube. Don't worry about alpha right now. You can tweak it, but let's not go into that. It's a little bit too advanced for now. Does anybody have any questions in the meantime? If not, I'll take that as a good sign. All right, great. So let's make this cube a little bit more awesome. So right now this cube looks a little bit funny, right? It doesn't have any shading. Like if you would have like if you'd have a cube in real life, you know, it would be impossible that all 3 sides that you can look at have exactly the same color. You know, light would give all of the different sides a different tone of color, basically. This is why this cube doesn't look 3D. We see it's a cube, but it doesn't really make sense right now. So we're going to swap it out of a different material, so I can teach you how to swap this stuff, and then we're actually going to go back to the basic material. So if you click and you hold on the basic material, as you can see, we can move it around. Okay, well, there's this really cool feature where if you shake your mouse, like literally just shake it, you pull the op out, but you keep the connection. Hey, Tropical Trevor, good to see you. So as you can see, we've now unplugged this op. Like, how would we plug it back in? Well, if we click and drag and pull the mouse to this circle and let go, we reconnect it. Okay, so I'm going to click, hold, and drag, and I disconnect it again. So let's say we want to apply some shading and kind of lighting to the cube. Okay, we're gonna go here to the middle. We're going to click this, and now we're going to type in Lambert. It's a simple shaded material. So don't worry if you're not following all of this. It's normal if you're learning new things. So I'm going to press enter, and I now create this. I'm going to make it a little bit brighter with the color picker. Let's get a more peaceful color for today. And look at that. Now we have a different kind of shading on the sides of the cube. Let's just turn this up a bit. So look at that. That looks now more like an actual 3D cube. Okay, so you know that should hopefully make a little bit more sense to everybody there. So now what I want you to do is I want you to just disconnect the Lambert material by shaking it and put it over there, and reconnect the basic material. Because to me it's kind of important that you understand how to use the user interface inside the cables. I mean, once you've got that down, a little bit of muscle memory, it goes very quickly with experimenting and making things. So we've gone back to the basic material. It has no shading. Okay, so if we look at the basic material up, we can see there's a lot of things going on here. And we can also see there's some parameters here, but they're grayed out, right? It's like, okay, why are they grayed out? That's because we didn't enable them by plugging something in, basically. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create a texture. So I want you to press escape and type in texture. What's a texture, in case you don't know? It's just basically an image. Let's just keep it really simple for now. So if you look at an image on the internet, on the social media, or a picture, that's a texture. The video you're seeing right there of me now with the webcam and the Twitch stream, that's also a texture. So textures are basically a way of representing pixels on the screen. So we want to load an image as a texture. So I'm going to click Add. Now this is here. So this is the texture up. And now we can see we've got a different kind of output port. This is this kind of like purpley color. This is a texture output. And if we go over here to the basic material, we see this is the texture input. So if I now click and drag this and let go in the middle, it's only going to allow me to plug a texture into texture input ports. So the other ports there, like the number ports, they won't allow me to connect it. So I'm going to connect this now to texture. Now, what happened? Okay, so we find it really important that you always see something when you do something in Cable. So this texture has a kind of like default hidden texture, which is just automatically there. And that's this one that you see here. This is a texture preview. Okay, so here we're looking at the canvas, like the 3D rendering, and here's a preview of the 2D texture. So if I now just click somewhere in the patch, this now disappears. If I want to see the texture preview, I have to click on an object which has a texture attached to it. So look, I click here, it's gone. I click here, and it's back. So, okay, we have a texture, and look, it's been applied to a cube. So how could we change the texture? Well, you know, we could use a webcam to create a texture. We could download an image from the internet. We could create our own textures procedurally. But right now, I just want to show you that we've got a couple of textures bundled with Cables itself. So now we're going to go into the file manager. So I'm going to click texture, and as you can see, I've got this a couple of options here. And what we're interested in is file. So file, if I click that, it will allow me to open up the file manager. So as you can see, this is a new part that's popped open. And this is like a kind of it's a kind of menu which will adapt to what you're doing. You could look at code here, you could look at textures, you could look at 3D models that you've loaded. So how do we get rid of it, first of all? Well, if you click this arrow here, you fold it in. And if you click this arrow again, it will fold out. So let's now say I want to get my favorite picture ever, the beach, because like who doesn't like being on the beach? I'm going to click it. And by clicking it, I've now gotten that texture, because it's an image, but it's a texture, and I've assigned it to the texture up. And as you can see, if I click the texture up now, we have this here. So let's try loading a different image again. So I'm going to click File, and I'm going to scroll over here, and I'm going to grab this UV. And as you can see, this is how we can apply a texture to a material. So a material is how we change the lighting and the shading of the pixels of a mesh, right? So what happens if we disconnect the texture? Then we go back to the default color. So let's plug the texture back in. And I'm going to go on File, and I'm going to grab this one, a black and white stripe. And now I'm going to fold the menu away. I'm going to use the right mouse button to click and drag and to move back over here. Okay, so I have black and white, but let's say I'd want to change the color of the white. Like, how could we do that then? Well, you know, there's a lot of things tucked away inside the Cables. So if we click Basic Material, we see an option here, Colorized Texture. So click it, and look at what now happened. We're using the color value here to change the color of the white pixels. Now, what I'm going to say right now, don't worry if you don't follow it. It might be difficult to wrap your head around. Let's do basic multiplication, right? If you get 1 and you multiply it with 1, you get 1. If you get 1 and you multiply it by 0.5, you get 0.5. If you do 1 and you multiply it by 0, you get 0. Sounds really simple. So what's happening here is we have these color values, and as you can see, they're all values between 0 and 1, and we're multiplying them with the values of the texture. So this white pixel here is 1, 1, 1, right? Red, green, blue. It's all in one. This black is 0, 0, 0. So when we change the color there, we can't change the color of the black pixels because that's the color multiplied by 0, okay? So that's basically how most things work with materials and textures. It's what we call blending. It's just really simple math once you wrap your head around it. So if I turn off Colorized Texture, this color picker here now doesn't change anything. If I click it, then we can change the color down. Great. So I'm going to click the texture. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to grab the beach. Great. Now, here's another way to close the menu. You can press the escape key. So the escape key normally creates an op, right? But if you press escape now, it closes the menu. Yeah. That's a really good one from Panda. So let me just see if I can get something here. Nice and quick. So that's a good one that I missed. Just give me a moment. Because of course, I need a moment to find this. All right, so let's go here. I have my file explorer and I'm just gonna move it over here so you guys can see this, and I'm going to click and drag this from my file explorer onto cables. And as you can see, it now says drop files to upload, and it needs it in this kind of area here. So I'm going to let go, and as you can see, it's now uploaded the file. Let me get rid of that file explorer. Now, there's a difference here with what's going on because this is a patch file, and if I click this, we go to the library files. So the library files are available all the time inside of cables. It's like the bundled assets that we have that are included. And if I click patch files, these are files that I, the user, have added to my patch, okay? So now it's here in the file browser, right? So I could minimize this. I could click the texture up. I can click file, and I can now click this. And as you can see, I'm going to press escape. We've now added this texture here. So I'm just going to explain a few little things right now. We can do a lot with textures, okay? So if we go down here now, we can see that the parameters that were grayed out before are now highlighted. We can interact with them. If we disconnect this, we can see I'm not allowed to interact with them. Why? It's a texture transform. If there's no texture attached, Cable says, I'm not going to let you change this right now. Because you as a user, you could move this and then go, it's not doing anything. So we're going to plug this in. I'm going to plug it into there. So I'm going to click the basic material, and I can now, like for example, move the texture on the x-axis. Okay? As you can see what's happening there, and I could move it on the y-axis. I could repeat it, which means we see it more. So I'm going to put this in 0 and 0. And as you can see, this is just like a really just a simple operation, but it allows us to manipulate a texture on a material. And there's a huge amount of ways to do this, but I just wanted to just show it you so that you could just play around with it, basically. So I'm going to click texture. I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to go to the library files. Don't forget, I just want to get you used to the workflow of cables. That's why we're going to keep on doing some things again and again, just to get the muscle memory in there. So as you can see, there's a huge amount of files here that we can use. And I'm going to grab a wipe. Let's grab this. Okay, so we're seeing this repeated now because I put the repeat on 4x4. I'm going to put it on 1x1. And here we have this gradient now applied to the cube. So I'm going to disconnect this. And I'm now going to move this over here. And the reason I didn't shake it loose was because it might have disconnected the texture up. So I'm going to connect this material in, the Lambert. How can I apply a texture to this? Well, that's the thing, I just can't. Some materials will allow you to do this and some materials won't, because all materials are designed with different goals in mind. Some of them are made to use a lot of different textures, like in game engines, so you could really import a lot of different maps and like make something look really awesome and cool. Some of them are just designed to be really, really fast, so they will not allow you to do that kind of stuff. And it's just like in 3D graphics, it's very normal to have a lot of different materials and that you normally pick the right material for the job. So let's just disconnect this. And let's plug this basic material back. I'm just going to disconnect the texture for now and go back to this cube. And you know what? Let's do this. let's actually get rid of the basic material. Let's get the Lambert material, because there's a little something that I forgot to show you. Let's just go back to the basics. So we're here. So it's kind of tedious if you want to change the view on this cube, but you're having to use a transform op, right? That's kind of weird. So we've got a really nice op for this. So I'm going to click here at the top, because don't forget, everything you put at the top affects everything underneath it. And we're going to type in orbit controls. So an orbit is like, you know, when Earth goes around the sun, we have an orbit of planets and objects in reality. So we're going to change the orbit of the camera. So I want you to add this. And it's not very clear what this does at the beginning. But now if I go here and I click and drag with the left mouse button, I can move the rotation and the view around. If I use the mouse wheel, I can zoom out and I can zoom in. Now you might think, Andrew, why didn't you show this at the beginning? Because you've got to get the hang of the basics first. So I can also click and hold the right mouse button in, and this will allow me to move the position of the view of the camera around, right? But let's say your cube goes off the screen and you think, whoa, I've lost it. I don't know how to get it back. What do I do? Well, click the orbit controls op, use your mouse wheel and scroll down, and here we've got the life-saving reset button. If we click that, we reset to the original view. So I can rotate this now, I can move in and out, and if I click the reset button, we move back. Okay, so we're going to use the orbit controls now because we just want to be able to move the camera around the scene nice and easy without having to click and drag on parameters, basically. So now I want to show you hierarchy. And this can be a little bit difficult at the beginning for some people to wrap their head around, but we're going to try and keep it as simple as we can. So all we've got now is one cube. Let's say that I want to add a second cube, okay? So there's two ways of doing this. Let me show it you like this. And I'm gonna redo the same thing a couple of ways, in different ways, to try and get this point across, because if you understand this, you're set with the rest of cables, then you're fine and you're good to go. Then you understand how this flow works. So I want another cube with a different color, okay? So I could create 3 ops and plug them all in, or I could just select these 3 and I press Control-C. And I now need to click somewhere else. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to click. That's kind of the position where they'll be pasted. I'm going to do Control-V. On Mac, it will be Command. So I just pasted this in here. Now I'm going to connect this cube, and we're not going to see it. Nothing changed. Let's click this material and let's make it red. Oh, now we see that, but we know we've got a cube here that's this kind of blue, but we're only seeing one of them. Why? Well, they're both in exactly the same position. And a computer has to make a choice with like what's rendered first and what's rendered last, you know, and you're going to see what's rendered last, okay? So how can we see that other cube? Well, that's simple. We can just go here now to the transform, and we could move it a little bit to the left. And I could get this one, and I could move that to the right. So let's move this 0.5. Let's move this minus 0.5. And I can use the orbit controls now, and I can move around, right? So I can use the mouse wheel to zoom out. So actually, let's move it -1, so we have a gap, and let's move this one by 1. I'm going to put Y on 0, Y on 0. And if I now use the orbit controls, as you can see, I'm changing the position of both cubes, right? Perfect. What would happen if I would get this red cube? You know, let's just make this clear now. So I'm going to click an op, and I can type here in comment. I'm going to put in red. You know what? Let's make this really obvious what it is, and let's make this more of a green. And I'm going to click here, and I'm going to type in green. Okay? Hopefully that makes it easier to follow. So what's going to happen if I disconnect this? First of all, the red cube will disappear. Let's press F for flow mode. Click and drag with the right mouse button. It's gone. It's not getting anything from main loop, so we're not going to see it. So orbit controls affects everything underneath it, right? So if we get the main loop now and we bypass the orbit controls and we plug it in here, what's happened? Well, you know, the cube's in its correct position. You know, we can click here and transform and we can move it. But if we now click and drag with that mouse button, what's happening? Well, this set of ops here, they're not being controlled by orbit controls, right? So we can click and drag here and move this, but you know, this set of ops isn't connected. So orbit controls can't do anything. So if we disconnect this, we reconnect it, we're now affecting both of the cubes, right? On older systems, by the way, flow mode can be a little bit heavy. So if you hear your laptop or anything taking off and the fan going on overdrive, turn off flow mode. Flow mode's just there to help you debug. I would not advise leaving it on the whole time when you're working on bigger patches. Okay, so we have this now happening where orbit controls is controlling both of these cubes. Okay, great. Let's do this now. Let's disconnect this. Let's click and drag them and move them down. Now, what's going to happen if I grab this and I plug it in there? Now the cube's in a different position, right? Now, I want to try and explain what's happening here. If we click this transform, it affects everything underneath it, right? Let's press F for flow mode. Look at this. Right there. So this transform is affecting this cube, this transform, and this cube. So if I now click this one and I move it, we move both cubes. And if I click and drag with the orbit controls, they move because orbit controls is affecting everything underneath it. Let's just move that cube out a little bit. There we go. So did you just see what happened there? If I move this one, it's not affecting the green cube. That makes perfect sense, right? Because, you know, it's only affecting everything underneath it. So this one cube here, that's the thing that's getting affected. So this is hierarchy in cables, right? Like we affect the things that are connected underneath all of the ops. And this works with everything. If it's 3D meshes, textures, everything. We have this flow mode. We have a flow of data that we need to respect if we want to make the things happen that we would like. Send it. Does cables operate on your CPU or GPU? It's a mix of both. So this part here with the ops, that's working on your CPU. This part here, this is WebGL, and that's running exclusively on your GPU. So things like textures and texture effects, they're all running on the GPU. Okay. So now we have basics of hierarchy, okay? So let's now call this the parent, and let's call this the child. Okay, so when we change the parent, we change the child, right? So I can rotate this now, and I can change it and move it around. But if I change the child, it's independent of the it's not affecting anything else underneath it. So this I can now turn and change here. Got the orbit controls, I can click and drag all of this around. So this is just important to learn because, you know, if you want to make a really cool interactive 3D or 2D patch, you have to learn how to make things work as a group or how to separate control. Okay, so let's disconnect this. And let's move this up here. Okay, so now we have two cubes, and that's not a whole lot that's going on right now. So I'm going to click the transform up, and I'm going to put this on -1. I'm going to put the rotation back on 0. I'm going to go here, put this on 1, and I'm going to put the rotation back on 0. Okay, so that same idea that we just applied with hierarchy, we can use it to change these things together. So I'm going to grab the timer up, because the timer up is a great way to animate things. And I'm going to plug this into the rotation X and the rotation Y. And I'm going to crank the speed up to, say, 10. Okay, so we've got one thing going on with one cube. And now we want to do something with the other cube. So we have a mathematical function called sine. And the sine is like a way of kind of creating a curve between -1 and 1. So let's move a little bit now into motion and animation, okay? So I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to click and drag this out, and I'm going to grab an op called the Sine Anim. I'm going to show you two ways to do this now. This is an animation in the form of a sine cosine curve, so I'm going to add it. Now, did you see what I did there? This is now automatically connected. Just in case you missed it, press delete. If you click and drag and pull this out, as you can see, there's a plus icon where my mouse is, and that means create an op. So I'll let go, and when I create the sine anim op, then it's automatically plugged in. So what does this do? Well, if I look over here, we're going to now learn a really cool new feature of cables. So if you go here and you hold the mouse button over a UI parameter, it's going to show you over time what that parameter is doing. So here we can actually see the visualization. This is a sine curve, okay? And we can use that to animate things. So if we want to know like how to use this op, visual feedback's a really good way to do it. So if I put the frequency now on 4 and hold this here, as you can see, it oscillates faster. If I put the amplitude on, say, 0.5, it's less. Now, you don't really see a difference because it's still brought from the top, from the bottom to the top. So if you look down there, it says min, max. So it's showing me what the minimum maximum value is that's reached. It's really cool for debugging. So I'm going to put this on 2, and I'm going to put this amplitude on 1. And I'm going to plug this into rotate X. And we're not really going to see anything happen because we're rotating it 1 degree, -1 to 1, -1 to 1. You're not going to see anything then because we have 360 degrees as a full rotation. So we can click this up, sine anim, and we can now turn the amplitude up. So if I'm going to turn this up to 90, we're going to go between -90 and 90. Let's see what happens. Look at that. So if I go here now, it's telling me that the minimum is 90 and the maximum is 90. So I could now put this on 180. And as you can see, we're getting this like full kind of spin right now. And this is where you can start plugging things into each other, right? So we could get the output from this timer and we could plug it into rotate Y. And now we're going to mix the sine anim with the timer. And this is just basically how you start making things move. You start plugging numbers into each other, you multiply them, you divide them, you remap the range. And I'm just trying to keep it nice and simple for today so you guys can follow this. So let's put this on 90 and let's put this on 1. Okay, so that's one way of creating a sine anim, but this sine anim is running independently of the timer. You know, if I change things with the timer, it's not going to affect the way that this is animated. So I'm going to delete the sine anim for now. So what we can do is we can get the timer value and we can plug that into the sine object, which is now just going to work on the math side. Don't worry if you don't understand a lot of these terms. Sine is just a way to make cool curves. Let's just keep it that simple if you don't know what it means. It makes that curve. If you know that, then you know enough. Don't be intimidated by this stuff. So I'm going to put the timer here. And I'm going to click and drag from the number output because I want to show you guys how to create things in different ways. And now I'm going to get the ops.math object. So this is sine. So I'm going to click add. Okay. So what's happening now is I'm getting the same effect as before as the sine anim, but now it's controlled and driven by the timer op. So if I would change the timer op now, we're also going to change, let's just plug this into rotate X. Okay, look at that. Amplitude is 1 degree. Let's put it on 90. And now look, now if I change the speed of the timer, I'm going to pull that down, we're going to change the speed of this cube and this cube. And this is great, right? This is what we want. We want to have like things controlled by like one universal speed, basically. So I'm going to click and drag. I'm going to pull this down so it's a little bit orderly. And I'm going to move this here. I know this is all really simple stuff, but before you can run, you got to learn to walk, okay? So there are a huge amount of options inside of cables to perform operations on numbers, right? Because manipulating numbers is how you're going to make things happen ultimately. You want a cube to move and animate, you've got to change the value of numbers. You want a texture effect later on to morph between different colors, you're going to have to change a bunch of numbers. So in any kind of program, Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, everything, you're always working with numbers. You have coordinates, positions, values. So being able to manipulate and change numbers, that's a really important thing with being able to make what you want. And no, you don't have to be good at math. The computer's good at math. You just got to know what it is you want to do and where to find it. And that might take a little bit of time, but don't worry about it. So now we've got this running. I could also use these values right now to change the color of something, okay? So why don't we try changing the color of this cube here with the output of timer? Now this is going to go wrong at first because I'm going to get the output of timer and I'm going to plug it into red. but red only goes between 0 and 1. And if we look at the output of timer, like right now it's on 2000 something. So let's plug it in. It's a red. And it's massive. It's gone past 1, so it's just blasted the color away. I can click the timer up and reset it. And look, it fades in and then it's gone. So what can we do with that? Well, I'm going to just show you a couple of tricks here. And don't worry if you don't follow it all. It's just to introduce you to some concepts, right? So we have a little mathematical operation called modulo. You divide a number by a number and you get the remainder. Don't worry if you don't understand that. Let's just use it and see it in action. So I'm going to pull out timer. I'm going to type in modulo. I'm going to press enter. And let's look at what happens now. This is why I want to do this, so you guys can see how this works. So we've got a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 2, but we want things to go from 0 to 1. So you can see what's happening here. It's like the number is getting divided and cut back off. We're getting the remainder. So I'm going to put this number on 1. And now we get a number between 0 and 1 the whole time, okay? So let's disconnect the timer from the Lambert material, and let's plug this in. And this is going to create a kind of pulsating effect. Right? And I'm trying to show you we can just do all this of one number, which is just increasing, right? So modulo also has a really cool option that's called ping pong. So let's look at this. We get this kind of triangle, right? If we enable ping pong now, we get this. So we're already creating an animation with movement and with color of just like one number, which is constantly incrementing, okay? So that's like one little trick for the modulo. If I would want to slow this down, then I would just go here, click in between, add a multiplier up, and now I can make it go faster. So I crank it up and it becomes really crazy with the strobe. I could put it on 0.2 and now it's going to be a lot slower. So as you can see, we're just shaping numbers here, right? That's all we're doing. We're just getting a number and we're kind of shaping the value. So I'm going to put this back on 1. Okay, so we've done this. Let's try something else. Let's now go back to this timer and we're going to grab a sine. Okay, we already did that. It's going to give us an output between -1 and 1. So here's an interesting problem. I want to use this to change the green. Let's go over here to this material. So this one's easier to follow. So I want to change the green component here, this one, right? But I know I only want the value to go from 0 to 1. Now, if I click on sine, it's going to go from -1 to 1. That's not what I want. The op expects 0 to 1. Let's click this, put it on green. So if you look here, what's happening, I've got this really long period where it's just black, because if it's less than 0, we don't see anything. So now what we want to do is we want to remap a number range. We want to get a range of a number and remap it to a new one. So we have -1 to 1, and we want to remap it to 0 to 1. Now, that's really simple. We're going to click here in between, and we're going to type in, map range. Maps a value from one range into another. I'm going to press enter. Now, this is old min, old max. So that's the value from sine. So it's going between -1 and 1. So I'm going to type in -1 to 1. And now I'm going to type here 0 to 1. And now, let's take a look at this. This should only go between 0 and 1. This is a really handy op. Let's say you've got some number which is between 0 and 1,000 and you want to remap that range to 0 to 1. Map range is your friend. This allows you to remap values, basically. It's an incredibly simple concept if you can wrap your head around it, and you would use this all of the time when you're going to do stuff with numbers and values. So I could now go here to the sine. I want it to go faster, and I can put this on, say, 4. So we've got this pulsating thing going on, right? I could now, let's just click and drag this over here. I could say, you know, I want to change the red amount, but I don't want it to go from 0 to 1. I want it to go from 0.5 to 1, basically. So what I can do is, I can do Control-C, Control-V, and I paste op. I'm going to grab the output from sine. I'm going to let go in the middle, and I'm going to plug it into value. That's the value we want to affect. And now I'm going to get the output from this, and I'm going to plug it into red. So because we copied the op, let's just move this up so it's not unclear. Just make a bit of space. Okay, so we know that -1 to 1 is good because we copied it from this op, and now we want the new min to be 0.5 and the new one 1. And now if we go down here, we can see that the minimum is 0.5 and the max is 1. So these are like the really simple basic building blocks of how you can start to create animations. So let's go one step further with this, right? So let's say that I now want to change the scale of the cube. The scale is its dimensions, its size. So if you have a box of 1 by 1 by 1 and you change its scale to 2 on the x-axis, it's going to become longer, right? So I'm going to go here, I'm going to click this, I'm going to type in scale, and what I want now is scale XYZ, because I want to be able to change the scale on each individual axis. So as you can see, if I click transform, we have the XYZ axis there, right? So if I now click this and I change X, as you can see, oh, whoops, let me just grab this and move it down here, sorry. So the order that you do things in, transform, a scalar, transform, that has an effect on each other. So I'm going to click scale XYZ, and as you can see, I can now change the scale of the cube. I can use orbit controls to turn and make it a little bit clearer. So I can make it really narrow, and I could like just change things here, right? So let's now say that I want it to grow bigger on X and smaller. Well, we have this sine value here. We're already familiar with using the map range. So I do Control-C, Control-V. I'm going to grab the output from sine. I'm going to plug it in here. And in 2 or 3 minutes, we're going to take a lunch break. So if you're getting a bit tired, don't worry. The break is in sight. So the old min and the old max, that's good. That's the output from sine right here, okay? -1 to 1. And let's say I want my cube to go from 0.2 to 2. I'm just picking a number range there. So the new min is 0.2. I'm going to press tab, and the new max is 2. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to plug it in, and I'm going to go to scale X. And as you can see, I now have this cube being animated, basically. All right, I think that's been enough for the first hour. We're going to take, how long do you think you guys need for a lunch break? Is 20 minutes okay? Or has everybody just sat there right now behind their keyboard, eating sandwiches and using the mouse? We're not finished yet, by the way. 20 minutes, it sounds good? Okay, so I'll tell you what, let's just say, okay, cool. Let's say 25 past 1. Then everybody's got just over 20 minutes. Toilet break, quick lunch break, grab a drink. So I'm going to mute the microphone, and I'll be back here at 25 minutes past. And then we're going to carry on with the rest of the workshop. Yeah, sure, you're welcome, Sander. Thanks for joining us. We've still got quite a few more things I'd like to cover. This was the basics. So yeah, I'll see you guys at 25 minutes past. And if anybody's a bit late, don't worry, you can always watch this later back with the recorded video. All right, see you all in a minute. Bye. Hi, everyone. So we're almost ready to continue the rest of this workshop. So just going to give it 1 more minute for everybody to come back. Okay. All right, so let's get back to a patch. So we were just basically learning how to get 2 cubes, change the color, and basically create some nice, simple animations, basically, with just getting like a basic number and being able to use that. Sorry, just give me 1 moment. Okay, great, there we go. So, now I want to show you 1 or 2 other things. We're going to take a little break off the patching aspect because I just want to be able to show you some of the other stuff that we provide with Cables GL. Because after this workshop is done, assuming that you want to still continue with learning this, it's like really important to know how to learn something and how to know more about something. So if we click an op inside of cables, like the cube, okay? Every single op inside of cables that you click, we have documentation, and if everything is good, an example file. So I'm going to click this cube, right? And now I'm going to click View Documentation right here. So if you don't see anything, you click the op, and right now you see all the parameters, and we always have it here at the top. View Documentation, View Example. So I'm going to click View Documentation. And it opens a new page, and it says an explanation, a one-line summary about what the op is and what it does. Here we have an explanation of the parameters, basically. And this is the most important thing. So you find some cool op, or you find an op and you think, I want to know what it does. You can click the documentation, and you can click this now, Open Example in Editor. So if I click this, it will get that patch that we saw there, and it will now open the example in an editor. I'm going to click here and press Escape. And it's really a simple example, right? Because we're just trying to show you the simplest example of this op, this cube. So I'm going to press F11 and go out of this. I'm going to leave. All right, so I'm going to go back here. So I could have also just clicked the cube and clicked View Example, and then I would have skipped the documentation page and I would have jumped instantly into the example file. So when you find an op inside the cables, you could press Escape, type in material, because that's something we've been working on today, and you look at something like IBL material, and you see this huge op, and you go, I have no idea how to use this. Well, that's okay, don't worry about it. Click the op, click View Documentation, and this is a big op, which is why I'm showing it. And as you can see, we get a detailed explanation here of how this works, and we can now click this and we can cycle through different materials. So that little icon that you saw there was the textures being loaded. So as you can see, I can now move this around. And you don't have to know everything by heart, like cables in any programming language is material is different than IBL material. The point I was trying to make here was, we can click an op, we can view its example, and we can also view its documentation. So like here, I'm looking at texture. Let's zoom in. And this one's well documented compared to the IBL material. So as you can see, we've got now like some kind of sidebar here that we can use to interact with the patch. And as you can see, we're getting different results here. So you can just carry on like this endlessly, right? You could go, all right, what's this sidebar thing? Okay, click View Documentation. Sidebar overlay to control values. And now we can see that this sidebar allows me to create a UI to change things. I could click Open Example in Editor. And I could go into this patch, and maybe I see this op, if true then, and I think, what does that one do? Here we go. So, this is the whole idea with cables. Each op has its own documentation and its own example patches that you can use, basically. Okay. So, let's close these off. Let's close these off. And let's close these off. Let's get rid of the IBL. He was a little bit complicated. And let's go back to a Lambert. All right. So now we're back to some basics. We got rid of all the animation stuff because you guys can just watch this back on the stream that's recorded. So we have this really nice simple cube. And let's do this. Okay. So you've done some really cool stuff. How do you save it? Well, let's take a look over here in this menu part. Here we have different parts like your preferences that can be opened up. And here we can do save. So if we now do save, patch save. So we save the patch. Let's go into full screen of F11. But the patch doesn't really have a name. So we go to patch settings. And here I'm going to type in my awesome epic cube. Because that's a pretty awesome epic cube. And I'm going to click save. So now this, the name of the patch is now updated here. All right. So You can do quite a few things around here. You could add another cables user to be a collaborator. This would then mean that you've both got permission to edit it. You can go back in time to different versions. Maybe you mess something up. This is how you delete the patch, but let's go back to basics. So here I could type in the description, and I'm going to show you now something which is one of the really cool parts of why Cables is really great with its community. So I'm going to say here, result of Twitch workshop, and I'm going to click save. Now, because you could grab creative works from other users, you know, if you want to publish a patch, which means that everybody else can see it, you have to pick a Creative Commons license. So this one's really easy for me. I'm just going to make it public domain. Now, I'm going to want to make the patch public just to show you how this works, and it's not going to let me, and I'll tell you why. I click it and it says, please enter at least 2 tags to make patch public. So tags are a way for people to find things. So if you type in cube, later on, you know, on the search page, you would find every patch that has the tag cube attached to it. So I'm going to type in cube, and I'm going to type in Twitch, and I'm going to click save. And now I'm going to click make patch public. Okay. And it says here, this project is public and can be seen by everybody. Okay, so I'm going to click here, I'm going to press escape, and I'll press F11. So now if I go to here, I'm going to click open cables GL. And here I can see the patch that I just made. And if I now scroll down, we can see here on latest patches, my awesome Epic Cube. You know, so this is a really cool thing about Cables now. So that's what I want to go to the next step about. So that's the next step I want to go into. So I just published this, right? But this is something somebody made 20 hours ago. Let's check it out. So I'm going to open it in a new tab. And this is something that a Cables user made. There's a sidebar. So we can turn up the quantity. We can boost. Wow, it's pretty cool. So we can click here and we can go into full screen. Okay, press escape to go out of it. So this is something that somebody from the Cables community made, basically. Pretty epic, I must say. I didn't see it until now. So I'm going to click open in editor. And this is the great part about making things with Cables in the community. People can share things with each other and remix it. So you can now go into this user's patch and you can see how they made that. Like, how did they do this audio analysis? Well, you know, I'm a software developer, so I know this, but here we have these audio analyzers, audio players. So, you know, you can go in there and you can deconstruct how somebody made their patch. You can also grab parts of it. I have to say, you have to respectfully look at the Creative Commons license and use discretion and some respect with what parts of the patch that you're grabbing and you're using and you're remixing. So the thing is, I couldn't save anything now with this patch because it's not mine. Right? So what I'd have to do now is, say I'd want to make a copy of this patch and then play around with it, okay? I mean, you could go in here now and you could play with it, no problem, but you want to really mess things up and save it. And you just go here and you click clone patch. So you click anywhere, click clone patch, and I'm going to call it SoundCloud raw/clone, okay. And now what happens is it saves a clone of this patch to my account, and then it reloads the window so that we've got that. So now I've got this, and I can go in there and I can change everything. So this is a really awesome thing with Cables because it's web-based, right? So the entire community can share everything with each other, and you know, everybody gets better because of that, and everybody becomes more creative and learns a lot more. And that's a real thing that we want to help nurture and to help it grow. It's very important to us as the Undev studio. So here, for example, is the Twitch stream that I did on Tuesday last week. This is the result of it. So I sat down and for 2 hours did the first Twitch stream with Cables GL, and I just had the whirlpool as an inspiration, and this is what came out of it after interacting with the community. It's very 90s with the color. It's got the best moon ever. And this is public, right? So you could go in here now and you could think, how did he make that whirlpool effect? I want to know how to do it. I have no clue how to do it. And you just click open in editor, and then we go in and you can start to look at things. But that's a lot of ops, right? Like, if you think, I don't know what all this is, how does this work? Well, it's time to introduce you to being able to bypass ops. So bypass is like a kind of guitar pedal, right? You have like an effect, and if you press it, the effect is on, and if you press it again, it goes off, right? You bypass it, but the sound can still go through. So we know that if we click a texture op, like image compose, that we can see a preview of it here. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and now this is a really cool thing, right? So if I click an op and I press D, let's see what happens. You bypass the ops. Look, they become grayed out, right? That means they're not doing anything right now. They're not included. So even though flow mode is onto here, you can see it stops there. This just isn't doing anything right now. If I click this op and press D, it enables again, and you can see over here the output of the mesh change. So we could go up again, and we could bypass all three of these. And now what we can do is we can start to bypass parts of the chain of ops, and we can start to get an idea what's happening here, right? So we can go to blur, and we can turn this off. And we could also click the image compose, and we can do this, and then we go, oh, okay, this image is what I'm looking at over there. Okay, and if I turn this off, and then that way you can start to pull things apart. And once again, if you don't know what something does, like FBM noise, click the view documentation. We click view documentation. Now we have an example, fractonial Brownian motion noise. It makes a texture which looks like this, which you can tweak and change, and you could open the example in the editor. So you could go in here now and just say, hey, I want to have this part right here, Control C, paste it in your own patch, start modifying it, start remixing it, and then adding it to your own stuff. So this is something that we're really proud of with Cables GL, and we have an amazing community that is just constantly making things all of the time, which is really great. So I can click latest patches now, and now we've got over almost 2,000 public patches, probably more actually, because people have private and public patches. This is going to be a little bit slow to load right now, because I'm doing this stream. But as you can see, this person here, they had like a problem, so they posted a question on the forum, and they post a patch, and maybe somebody else can jump in and help with that. Here's a patch that I made which showed how to create an animation with a camera position, basically, and how to go back and forth. So, everything you can kind of think of, there's always going to be like a little example of it or some kind of solution that was already built. And you can just go in here and you can just find everything pretty much that you need. So, oh look, somebody here made a depth focus and fog example. So, they have this like blur width, fog density, and position. And this is a really nice patch. So that's just something I wanted to introduce you to. There's enough here for you to study and pull apart and go into for months and probably even years. So don't get intimidated by node-based programming and graphics. Nobody understands any of this when they start out. That's really normal. And just go into these examples and just remix, pull it apart, make it your own. I mean, this is how music is made, paintings, drawings, everything. We all get inspired by something somebody else did, and then we create something based upon that. So as you can see, this is one I want to share. So this was a tutorial we did, a copycat. Copycat is a series we have on YouTube where we copy something that already exists and we try and recreate it in Cables. So this is like a sci-fi tunnel. So if you want to make a version of this, you can just copy that, make it your own, and then go wild from there. All right, so let's get back to the workshop. So now we know how to learn about ops. We know how to find examples about ops. We know how to do basic hierarchy control, where we can control meshes separately from each other and we can give them a different color. So the thing I want to introduce you to now is what we call textures and texture effects. This is a little bit more beyond the basic level right now, and it might be a little bit difficult for people to follow. Don't worry about it if you don't. Just be open and just like embrace the newness. So I'm gonna get rid of all of this. And we're going to go back to main loop. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a texture and I'm going to put it on a rectangle. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull out main loop and I'm going to make a new op that you haven't seen yet, and it's called image compose. Compose images and effects as layers to generate images. Let's add it. zoom in and press F11 to go to full screen. Now, nothing's happening, okay? It's just a black screen, but we can see it does stuff with textures because we've got a preview. So we're gonna do something really simple now. We're gonna pull this out and we're gonna grab a checkerboard. So there's a new thing I want to introduce you to now. It's called namespaces. So this op is actually called ops.gl.textureeffects.checkerboard. Okay, so we've got more texture effects. So I'm going to click this, I'm going to add it, and then this happens. But we don't see anything. Why? Well, you know, that's a 2D texture. And what we see here are 3D meshes with materials that get applied, right? So, you know, we can't see anything because there's no 3D mesh. There's no cube, there's no rectangle, there's no sphere. So we need to get this texture and we need to put it into a material and then put it onto a mesh. So let's keep this really simple right now. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make a rectangle. Imagine a rectangle as your canvas that you're going to paint on. I'm going to click add. But it doesn't have a texture input, right? And that is why we need a material. So I'm going to press escape and I'm going to grab what we already used, the basic material, click add. And this now does have a texture input. So I'm going to pull this down, and I'm going to connect this to main loop with a trigger. And there we go. Rectangle appeared. And now we want to see this texture on that rectangle. So we just get this texture out, and we plug that into the texture input. And watch what happens. We now get the checkerboard on the rectangle, right? So you always need to, that's what we call OpenGL. It's a kind of like graphical programming language. And you know, you need a mesh with a material to see something on the screen, and then we need to apply a texture to a material. Nice and simple. Now, I'm gonna just do something here. Don't worry about getting it. Look at this, right? There's two trigger outputs from main loop. And the computer's taking a guess right now at which one is rendered first. Now this is okay. It's really simple what we're doing. Cables knows how to sort this out. But later on, if you'd connect like 30 ops out like this, the order could get wrong, right? So I'm going to just disconnect this with the right mouse button. I click and drag, let go. Nothing's happening, no flow mode. I'm going to pull this out, and we're going to grab an op you need to use a lot inside the cables, the sequence op, and it allows you to control the order of execution and triggering. Whoa, what's this? Well, this accepts a trigger in, and now what happens is, it's going to, for each trigger here, it's going to send a trigger out of all of these here. Before you think, I don't get this, let's just make another sequence op just so I can show it. And I'm going to press F for flow mode. And I'm going to plug this in here. And I'm going to plug this in there. And that one in there. And I could just carry on doing this, right? So what happens is, this is trigger 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it goes from 0 to 15. So this is the first trigger. That's the second trigger. That's the first trigger. So we use the sequence op when we want to be sure of the order of execution. This is really important because computers are really stupid. You know, they only do what they're told. They don't understand the order that you've got to do things in. You know, when I'm going to cross the road, I know I should look at the traffic lights first before I cross. I don't cross and then look. Computers, they don't understand this. You have to tell them exactly what to do. But because we're not working with code, which goes from top to bottom, we have to control the sequence and the order of execution ourselves, which is why we use the sequence op. So right now, I'm just going to say, I want the texture to be rendered, and then I want the cube to be rendered. So I'm going to go here, and now if we look, you know, we've got flow mode, but this doesn't have a trigger, so it's not going to work. And I'm going to just grab this one, I'm going to put that there. Now we have the same as before, and you might think, why is Andrew showing me this? Trust me, the more you get into cables later on, you need to know about this op. So now we have this rectangle there. I'm going to click the rectangle, and I'm going to make it bigger. Great. So now I'm going to show you how to resize the canvas with the mouse. So if we click here, all of a sudden these options appear, okay? So this one here, if I click it, I'm going to go into full screen. And if you want to get out of that, press escape. And we go back. Okay, cool. You've got your amazing cables work, and you want to take a screenshot of it, and you're going to grab the snipping tool. No, don't bother. We've got this covered. You just click here, and this will allow you to save a screenshot. And then you can save that somewhere. So whatever you see there will be saved at the resolution that's here. This enables you to toggle the sound on or off, and this is a helper, which I'm not going to cover right now. If I want to change the resolution, I can click and then grab it here. You can see the arrow change, and I can now change the size of the canvas. But as you can see, the texture there isn't filling up the whole screen, right? And I'm not going to go into why. That's a little bit beyond this workshop, but this just makes sense because we're looking at a 3D object represented on a 2D screen, basically. But this is how you rescale and resize your canvas. Imagine you'd want it to be really exact. Like, let's say I'd want it to be 1280 by 720. It'd be really horrible if I'd be dragging this out and trying to get it. So you just click here on these numbers. I'm going to type in 1280 x 720. Press OK. Great, that works. If I want it to be smaller, I can just click that again and do 640 by 480. If I'm correct, you can even leave the X out, and cables will just get it. Yeah, cool, great. So let's put this back here. All right, so we created a texture, and now we've put it on a rectangle. So we've got a huge amount of texture effects. Like, we've got so many, and the thing is, you can add them all together, right? So I'm going to click this checkerboard, and I'm going to get rid of it. And because of that, we don't have a texture. So I'm now going to click this, and I'm going to scroll on the left-hand side, and then we're going to look here at texture effects. So I'm going to click it, and now it's going to give me every single texture effect that we've got inside the cables. As you can see, they've all got this namespace ops.gel.texture effects. So if I click it, I can now get a little preview with most of them. If they don't create a texture, you might not see something because they might be an effect for a texture. Let's look for this. Let's start with a circle. Yeah, let's add this. And let's move this a little bit over here. So now we've got this circle there, okay? And look at this, it looks stretched. That's weird because if I look at this, it doesn't look stretched. Well, this is the canvas, right? It's got a resolution, it's got a size, which right now is 666 by 394. That is not a square number. You know, 2 by 2 is a square, 4 by 4 is a square. If I would put this down 640 by 640, now it looks correct. So just to show you what's happening, look, if I move this up, it looks kind of squashed, unavoidable. So there's another way to get around this, kind of. Well, if I click Image Compose, it's creating a texture, right? And the texture is this. Just try and imagine it, okay? This Image Compose, it creates an empty texture. All these values are these pixels, and they've not been filled yet. We'll press F for flow mode. And what it'll do is the Image Compose will now go down to this op, and it'll say, these are the pixels you want me to paint. I'm going to store those values. But I'm going to show you in a moment, we're going to create more ops that go underneath, and you can add them all together. So like before, we had 2 cubes and 2 materials. You can get multiple texture effects, and you can blend them together, just like in Photoshop that you have different layers. So I'm going to go here to the Image Compose, and right now it says use viewport size, which means the dimensions here, 669 by 452, get used here. Now let's say I want to make this texture square, right? I'm going to click this, and I'm going to put it on, say, 512 by 512. And look at that. Now it's correct, right? So the only reason it was getting squashed was because we were actually, I mean, look, this is square. If I click use viewport size, you can see that this texture here becomes like a rectangle. It's not square, right? It like moves along, you see? So that's why things can be a little bit weird with that. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to put it on 512 by 512 so it's square. It's kind of hard to see that rectangle right now. All we see is a circle. So behind that 3D mesh, we have what we call we have an area that we can color, the clear color. Let's just call it like that. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to type in clear color. Sets all cleared pixels to one color. Let's press enter. Voila, look at that. Now we can see the rectangle. So if I click clear color and I click here, as you can see, I can change the color of the background. Okay, so let's put it like this. So now we know what we're working on, that we've got this rectangle, right? Now if I go to the rectangle and I put the width on 1, we're going to get squash texture, right? See, that makes perfect sense. If you're not following it right now, don't worry about it. You'll get it soon. So now I have this texture. It's a circle. I can click the circle texture, and I can change the size of this, right? I can go to fade out and I can create something like this, and I can change the color of it. So let me do this now. I'm going to put the fade out on 0 and I'm going to put this on white. Now, like I said, don't worry if you're not following all of this. It's just to introduce you to some of these concepts. So what would I do if I wouldn't want the rest of that rectangle to be black? I'd want it to be transparent, right? Opaque, that I could like look through it. Well, we have here in the basic material a texture opacity. So with opacity, this is a texture that's going to go in. If the pixel is white, then we see what's there, and if it's black, we don't. So this is just purely black and white, right? So I'm going to get this, I'm going to plug it in there. And now we only see a circle, right? But you know, there is a rectangle there. We've just like made the pixels of that material transparent. So just to show that that's working, we can go to size and we can make this bigger, and watch, it's going to hit the edges of the rectangle. Let's go a little bit bigger. See, so the rectangle is still definitely there, but now we've hit the limit of what it is. So if I now put the size down to here, I can disconnect this, and there we've got the rectangle. I'm just using the right mouse button now, and I'm going to click drag and put it back. So I'm just going to get rid of this for now. Just wanted to show you that you can do that. You can make things transparent. We get that question a lot. So let's add two texture effects together. So here we have the circle texture. And I'm now going to click in between, and I'm going to type in pixel noise. Here we go, pixel noise. And as you can see, it's going to generate this kind of pattern. It's one of my favorite effects. I'm going to click add. What happened here? Let's just disconnect the circle for a minute. So here's the pixel noise up. All right, let's just make this a little bit cool for now. So we have these numbers, 4 by 4, so we could get 4 of them on the screen. We could get 64 by 1. So, you know, this is a really powerful up. You can get a lot of different things coming out of it. Let's put it on 8 by 8 for now. Now, as you can see, I can use these parameters and move things around. I can put it on RGB so it becomes colored. You know, texture effects are really powerful. And what I want to do now is I want to animate it to move. Okay, so I know that if I use the Z parameter, they change. But look, the values are jumping. I click loop, and now when I turn them, it smoothly goes from one value back to another. So let's animate this. So I'm going to go to C, and I'm going to pull it up now. There's a different way of doing it with cables. Instead of clicking and dragging down, you can create by clicking and pulling up. And then I'm going to create a timer. And look at that, we have this timer number now going into Z, and it's animating it. So let's slow this down so it's not too fast. So remember what I said about, you know, each texture effect is a kind of layer, right? You know, so we can just like stack things together. So now I'm going to plug this in. And what happens is, you know, image compose is going down, right? So we press F for flow mode. So first of all, it grabs all of the pixels that pixel noise is given it, all those values, and it says, okay, here's pixel noise. And then it goes to the next one, circle texture, and that gets put on top, right? So we can now click circle texture and we can move it, and we can do stuff like this. So this is like compositing two texture effects into each other. And some texture effects don't create anything, they affect something that's already there. So let's get rid of the circle texture. So I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to grab edge detection. So if we look here, it draws only the edges of an image, and I'm going to add it. And look at that. So edge detection by itself wouldn't do anything. I'm just going to show you. So I'm going to disconnect this and plug it in there. You know, this won't work because edge detection is designed to work on an existing texture. It's a texture effect. It doesn't create a texture that you can see something with by itself. So we're going to click this and we're going to plug it in there. So now we have edge detection. And don't worry if you don't know all this, like learning texture effects, that takes a little while. So I'm just going to show you a few. Zoom blur, and we see this directional blur effect, and I'm going to add it, and I'm going to turn the strength down, and now I can move the X component. And look at this, I'm starting to create different textures which are all applied to this rectangle. Now, a really important thing to know is this. I'm going to just disconnect this. Is like every single texture effect here is like, it's a layer, right? And like something in Photoshop, you can determine how much you blend it. So we have a blend mode and we have an amount. And if I pull the amount down, it's going to become darker, right? We're multiplying it by 0 to say it simply. And if we pull it up to 1, this happens. So, you know, if we go to the edge detection and we plug that in, we get this. But with the blend amount, I can decide how much of this is added to the image. So if I'm going to pull this down now, as you can see, I can turn it up and I can start to add the edges. But now there's this problem. The pixels are becoming darker because we have this blend mode normal. And that's not what I want. Let's say I want to add these white lines on top of the pixel noise. Well, if you click here, you get a drop down with, these are the names from Photoshop, the blend modes. So if I click add now, look at that. We keep the original values of these pixels and we add these pixels on top. Okay, so you know, you could go in here now and you could pick different blend modes to give you different looks. So here's multiply, invert, average, add, subtract, difference. And just off pixel noise and edge detection, we're already getting like a lot of different looks. And there's a huge amount of texture effects. You can combine these in an almost near infinite amount of ways and just keep coming up with stuff. So I could plug in zoom blur right now. And the things that we did before with like animating some stuff, you know, I could get this timer. I could grab the sine like we did. And I could plug this now, for example, into zoom blur X. And as you can see, we're now moving that from left to right. Let's put the frequency up. I could grab another sine right now. I could plug that in to value, and this I could then plug into Y. And if I now put this on a little bit of a higher phase, we can start to create this kind of like circle effect, where it's going to move from left to right, like a kind of circular pattern. Sorry, let's grab cosine. My bad. There we go, cosine. We're going to put that here. And we say frequency 4, 4. And I just messed up something there. Ah, whoops, that's on strength. My bad. X and Y. So now we're creating this kind of like circle effect, right? We're moving the X, Y like this, sine, cosine. Don't worry if you don't get it. If you just use both of them and you plug a number in, you get a circle. That's the easy way to remember it. And the thing I'm trying to show you here right now is, you know, we're already coming up with a lot of different looks. So I can change the strength of this. I could move it up a little bit. I can move it up a lot. And this is just how you create cool visuals. You start plugging stuff into and out of each other, basically. So let's disconnect zoom blur for now. So this is kind of cool. What happens if we pull this down? We can click texture effects again. And we can start to see a huge amount of things here that we could use. So before we had the twirl effects that I was using for the whirlpool. I'm going to click and add that. And look at this, we have a twist amount. And we're just turning all of this into just something different. We're painting with pixels, basically. And that thing I showed you before with the map range. So let's grab this sine up. We know it goes from -1 to 1. And you know, let's get rid of zoom blur because this is all temporary. I'm going to just plug this into map range. And I'm going to say old min is -1, old max is 1. I'm going to say, you know what, go from 200 to 1000. I'm going to plug this into twirl, twist them out. And now if we follow this same pattern, this is going to get remapped to the twirl, right? There we go. So the sky's the limit with texture effects. So a little common question some people have is like, yeah, okay, this is great, but I want it to fill the whole screen. You know, I mean, how do I get this to match up? The thing becomes smaller every time I move it up. I just want to make something full screen. So yes, Mickey, we do have instancing, and I'll be showing that in a little bit. So let's get rid of this. Clear color, basic material, and rectangle. Okay? I'm going to press delete. We're not going to see anything because we don't have a mesh, right? So you want to see something on full screen? We try and make it with cables that the name of what you're looking for is actually called what it should be. So you want a full screen something. So if we even type in full screen, 2 ops appear, full screen mode, full screen rectangle. Draws a rectangle using the full WebGL canvas size. I'm going to press enter. Now, you don't see it right now maybe and get it, but this is a rectangle op, and it's always going to be the exact width and height of the canvas, no matter what you do here. There's always going to be there. If I get rid of this and I grab a rectangle, that's not true. It tries to keep its scale and ratio. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to grab full screen rectangle. So full screen rectangle, you could apply a material, but you use this so often, we already added a texture input that you can see here. So I'm going to grab this and I'm going to plug it in there. And now we have a full screen rectangle, right? So if we click and drag this, look what's happening. It's always full, no matter what. And this is when you got to start playing around with settings. So if I go to Image Compose and I click Use Viewport Size, the resolution of the texture, like how many pixels are there, that's going to be represented like this. And you might think, yeah, why is it squashed? Well, that makes sense. If you've got a square image and then you put it on something and you squash it, the image is going to look squashed. This is why 3D things look different when you change the canvas size than 2D things. They're two completely different things, basically. So I'm going to turn this off and I'm going to put it on 512 by 512. The viewport option on a rectangle, that's a little question there from Faciliotron. I don't see the option that you're talking about, Faciliotron. There's no viewport option on any of these ops that I can see. Could you be more specific? Image Compose, right, okay. So, good question. I thought I'd covered that, but we'll just try it again, all right? I'm just going to disconnect this, so we keep this nice and simple. So here we have a texture, right? So when I disable Use Viewport Size, look at these numbers, they're visible. If I click this, they become grayed out. And look, they now grab the value here. So the size of the canvas here, let's make this 640 by 480. And if you look here now, this is now 640 by 480. That's the size of the texture. And if you look, it's rectangular. So if I now pull this out, look what happens. The texture there also becomes rectangular. It's grabbing the amount of pixels here and using those dimensions to set the texture size. If I now click Image Compose and I disable this, I could now put this on 512 by 512, which is a square number, right? And as you can see, the shape of this texture, its dimensions do not now match this. Now you might think, why do I want to do that? Well, you know, some effects that you might use might be really heavy on the GPU, and you might not need to render it at the viewport size. It's kind of like gaming technology. You know, you want to optimize everything to run as fast as you can because Cables is a real-time application. If we do things that are too heavy, the frame rate drops. And when the frame rate drops, things stutter and jump around, right? And that doesn't look good. You know, you want a cube to spin smoothly, and when it jerks like this, then obviously the system is doing too much. So being able to change the resolution of a texture or a texture effect is a way to save GPU memory, because Cables patches run also on mobile phones, but my mobile phone does not have the GPU of my desktop computer. That's a gaming rig that can handle pretty much everything I throw at it now. So when I want to make a Cables patch that's going to run on mobile, that's when I'm going to want to change the resolution size so I can really optimize my patch to run faster. We can even say of a Cables patch, are we being loaded on a mobile device? If so, use these resolution sizes, which are much smaller because the screen's smaller and there's less GPU. Or on a desktop, we can use these texture sizes. So hopefully that answers your question. So I'm going to click this back in right here, and I'm going to plug that in now. So that's been an introduction to 2D texture effects, right? So at the beginning, I tried to cover like, hey, these are 3D meshes, like cube. You've got cubes, spheres. we've got a huge amount of meshes, basically, too many to mention. All the basic primitives there covered, and we've got a huge amount of texture effects. So meshes are in 3D space, and textures are 2D, basically. And a material is how we apply a 2D texture to a 3D mesh. If you've got that down, then you're pretty much there with like learning all of the basics. So don't forget, with all of these kind of things, you can just go to the Cables webpage and follow our examples. And one thing I forgot to show everybody before, I want to do that right now, is if you go to the main page, we have a section here called Learn. Okay, so hold on to your horse, because I'm going to click the op reference list. Now take a look at this. These are all of the ops that we have inside the cables. Do not get overwhelmed. Some of them are for MIDI devices, some of them are for OSC, some of them for are arrays, like lists of data. Some of them are to create meshes, texture effects, and as you can see, they've all got their own namespace. So you want to know everything with meshes, we click it, and then we have all of the mesh ops right here. You want to know what one of them does, you click it, you go in there, and we have examples. Okay, this is missing the example patch right now. As you can see, it's kind of difficult to always keep that up to date, because I think we've got like over 1,000 and something ops right now. So that's one thing. Let's go back to Learn. This is what I wanted to show you, basic example patches. We gave this an overhaul a long time ago. So these are like examples of concepts, right? So let's pick a good one. Easing. If you don't know anything about easing, we're going to click it, and we're going to go, huh? What is this? And this patch will now try to demonstrate the concepts of easing. So there's a whole explanation here about what easing is. You can now go into the editor and change stuff. We could go down here. So somebody asked a little while ago, do we have mesh instancing? So if we click it, look, mesh instancer, example. And here we have mesh instancing. Just so you know, mesh instancing is a way of drawing the same geometry on the screen a lot of times without slowing the system down, because it happens on the GPU. I'm not going to go more into it than that. It's a great technique for rendering like thousands of cubes or spheres on the screen and not getting a low frame rate. So as you can see, this is mesh instancing. These are cubes, and yeah, Vasilitron, it's kind of like that. So full screen rectangle creates this mesh, which is always a rectangle, which always has a width and a height that fills the canvas size. And when you plug your texture in, it's kind of like the same thing as a normal rectangle, but it's always adapting to the size of the canvas. So this is mesh instancing, and as you can see, this is just like a little demonstration of some stuff that you can do there, like changing the scale, changing the position, changing the rotation, changing the opacity. So this is mesh instancing, and if we click here, for example, surface scatter tutorial, here we can see a really cool thing. It's like this head mesh, and we've got cubes mapped to that, and we can swap to a sphere, we can swap to a cube, and we work really hard to put tutorial videos out. So here we have a link to a YouTube video. If you click that and go over here, you've got a full 10-minute tutorial on how to use this op from the beginning, you know, so we try and really put these things out as much as we can. And as you can see, we can go here. You want to know something about fog? Here's an example. You want to know what noise textures that we've got? We can go here and we can go through different kinds. Noise textures too. So, you know, these noise ops are a really great way to generate textures, basically. So I just wanted to show you this, that the basic example patches, that's a really good place to go to learn the concepts. Here we've got video tutorials, which is the YouTube channel that we've got. And for the programmers among you, we've got a GitHub repo, Coding with Cables. I'm going to just show you only a little bit of that right now, because I just want to make you aware that this is possible. So here we have like examples of how to create your own ops. And the best part is we've also, of course, got a YouTube channel for this, where I just show you how to code ops, basically. And most of the videos are only 6 or 7 minutes. It's not that complicated. So this is something else I want to now cover with cables. So let me just turn this off, because I don't want to get distracted right now, and get rid of this. and this. Okay, so here's a really cool thing with cables. I'm going to press escape and I'm going to type in sum. This allows me to add two values together. Okay, so when we look at this, if we click the E key, or we go over here and we click the op and we go to this menu, we can say view opcode, right? We click that and this editor pops up. So this is a really powerful thing with cables for the programmers among you. I'll keep this just short for the people that aren't. You can code your own ops inside the cables. I'm not going to go too much into this right now, but here we can see an example of this is how we make two number ports on the op. And if we hover here, we see number 1, number 2, and then we have the ports number 1, number 2. So every single op in cables, you can click it and you can look at the code that we use to make the op, right? Now, let's say you would want to make your own version of the sum op. I don't know, you want to add 4 input ports together. You can click sum and you can go over here, one moment, and we click this second icon there. And here we have an option, clone opcode. So I can click that and I can type in sum 4 numbers. I'm going to press, it warns me here, name, space parts have to be uppercase. So I have to do this. Okay, so I need to make it capital, uppercase, and click create. And now if I do this, I'm going to press escape and I'm going to type in sum, and there it is. There's my user op, sum 4 numbers. I'm going to add it. And look at that, I've cloned an op and now I've got the code and I can go in there and I can alter it myself, because you're not allowed to change the code of an op on cables because you're not an admin, and if you did, you change it for everybody. So that's why you have to clone an op. So if I would want to add 2 extra input ports here, I'm just showing this, I'm not going to go into a whole coding thing right now. All of these ports have to have a different name. I just want to show you how quick and easy this is, just to give you a taster. And I'm going to save it, and as you can see, I've now got 4 input ports, right? So we've got a couple of functions with things like getters and setters, so you can get the value from a port and you can set the value from a port. So we've got this little bit of code here that says number 1 or 2 on change, run this function, execute. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this, and I'm keeping it really simple, so I don't want the non-programmers to run out. So this code is basically saying if input port number 1, 2, 3, or 4 changes, run this code. So here we add number 1 and 2 together. I'm just going to copy that. I'm going to paste it. I'm going to click plus, and then I'm going to get number 3, number 4, and I'm going to save. So let's test it, right? So if we look here, I'm going to type in 0, 10, 11, 15. And look at that. In under 4 minutes, I just modified a really simple op inside the cables, used the built-in editor, and I made my own op. So if you're a little bit of a programmer or you want to learn programming, it's a great way to get into it. And the best part is you can just click any op, press E, and you can see the code that we use, and you can make your own versions of it. And this is something we're really proud of, because sometimes users come along and they go, hey, I was missing this op, it didn't do this or that. I've created it myself, which is really, really cool. And it's a great way to be able to solve a problem, because we make as many ops as we can, so you can do really cool things with cables, but who knows, maybe you need something that doesn't exist yet. In cables, you can just create your own ops and clone them and just make them yourself. So I'm looking at the time, it's 20 past 2. Wow, we've been going for around 2 hours now. I think that's a real long time for everybody. Excuse me, bit of water. Yeah, so that's another thing. Andrew, can I use a patch on my website? That's a very good question, Mickey, and that's something I wanted to get into. So here's the really awesome thing about cables, right? For the web developers among you or people that are interested about it. imagine you would want to get your cables patch and put it in your web page. It's really, really easy. And this is covered in the documentations. And we're going to be getting around to, well, I'll be getting around to making a tutorial about it soon. But it's really easy to get your cables patch and embed it, and export it and place it into your web page. So if we go over here, this is my awesome patch, right? And I'm going to go to export. Patch not saved. Save patch before exporting. Save. There we go. Export. Patch not saved. Save patch before exporting. I'm a little bit confused right now. Hold it. Ah, there we go. Just needed a moment to save. So here it says export patch a static website can be directly uploaded to a server. So you have your server with your basic web page, right? Like your index.html and any other files and things that you've got there that are creating your web page. And we have a couple of options here, like include assets automatic. Maybe I have a 3D model in there, or like you saw, an image that I've dragged in from my computer. Those assets, if you click include automatically, saves you a lot of work later. The package, we can have it as multiple files or a single JavaScript file, and compatibility, older browsers and modern browsers. And you just do this, export. And now we see that we can download this. I'm going to go here. And now I get a zip file which will have the JavaScript in there, the text file, and I'm not going to go all into that now, but basically everything's there that you need to put it into your web page. Like I said, this is covered in the documentation, nice clear examples, and we've got a little video on it. It's a little bit old now, but it's still pretty much relevant. So for the web developers among you, yes, you can get your cables patch right there, and you can export it, and you can include it in your web page. That's the beauty of cables. Like, you can just set this up and you're up and running in under 2 minutes with this. We've also got on GitHub, we've got the CLI. It's like this command line interface, and that allows you to set up a way to export a patch. I've not used this too much, but it's a thing that a lot of people use when they want to just tweak a patch, export it, re-import it, and then this process goes a lot faster. So that's the whole idea with cables, right? We don't only want you to be able to create beautiful things. If you go to the Made with Cables page later on, you can see actual real world web pages. Like I said, if I go here to convergencela.com, this is a web page that is running cables, right? So, this is a web page that's running cables. It's a server with the web page data, and it's running a cables patch, which is communicating with all the Twitter API stuff. So that's basically, this is what cables is also designed to do. Make a web page, embed it in make a cables patch and embed it into a web page, basically. Hope that covers that question. Okay, so I feel like we're getting a little bit towards the end of this, and of course people can only concentrate for so long. So now it's FAQ time. If you've got any questions that you'd like to ask, I'll do my best to answer them. So I'd like to say thank you as well to everybody that stuck around and followed what we were doing. I hope this has been educational, informative. So does anybody have any questions about cables? You can ask us anything. Ah yeah, there we go. There's an answer from Panda with, be cool if there was an embedding option. Yes, like Panda said, you can use an iframe to embed it, and we're working on a WordPress plugin which will allow you to get your cables patches and put them into a WordPress site. So does anybody have any questions? The wilder, the better. Okay, Karyazim asks, hello, can you siphon cable patches into VJ software, or would you have to route it via NDI? Looking to create MIDI controllable visual patches. Okay, let's answer that one first. So no, Cables does not currently support siphon texture support. For the people that don't know what that means, it would mean that we could get this texture that we're generating here, and we could send that texture on the GPU to another application like Resolume, Avenue, or some other VJ software like VDMX. No, that's currently not supported. That's due to the constraints of web technology and security. It's something we've had for a long time on our list, but it's not a simple thing to implement. And basically, I've built my own live VJ software in the past, and I would say to you, it's kind of strange to do that because everything that other VJ software has pretty much like texture effects, we've got all of that inside of Cables, basically. So I'm actually planning, hopefully in the next week or two, on starting a weekly Twitch stream where I'll be building my own VJ software inside of Cables exclusively, which will react to audio and MIDI. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, you might want to follow us on Twitch. I did try to get this working via NDI. I was not successful. And of course, that's not a cross-platform solution. So, you know, we need to have a solution that works on Mac, Linux, and Windows, basically, because we're doing it with the web browser. So we hope to one day support Siphon, texture output or something similar, but we don't have that yet. Can input API or live tracking monet data into COD? I don't really understand that question. One Drone Dancing, could you rephrase that? I mean, you can access data from APIs, that's for sure, with Cables. We've got, I mean, it's a web program, so we've got everything to request APIs, and if it's not there already, you can just code it yourself. Some of these VJ softwares allow you to load a web. Well, you can load a web page inside of Cables. I mean, if we grab an iframe, there we go. So we just loaded the undev page in an iframe inside of the canvas, right? I mean, Cables is web-based, so anything that we can do with the web, we can pretty much do inside the Cables. So yeah, we can also add HTML and CSS elements here as well. I mean, I wish I had like 8 hours of time to explain everything, but there's a huge amount of things that we can do. Do we support external text editors? I don't think so. Basically, everything you do for editing Cables ops, you edit inside of the Cables window itself. Question was, do we support external text editors? And I mean, we've got a lot of basic functionality there. Like you can see, if I double-click this variable here, everything that is that variable gets selected. If I do Control-D, like a good normal IDE, you know, it allows me to select those things. We have stuff like in Sublime with the column where we can do this. So a lot of the basic functionality of an IDE text editor is built into the online ACE editor of Cables. Carlison, that sounds great. What Twitch account will you be streaming from? We have a Twitch account that's called Cables GL. So we're really active on the social media. We're trying to push stuff out just pretty much every single week. It's a bit crazy right now, of course, with the whole lockdown. So there's more time to do that, which is why we've been focusing on Twitch. So we're on Twitch, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and we're on YouTube. If you want to follow our tutorial videos, go over and follow us on YouTube. Twitch, Cables GL, basically. I think you can even click... can you do that? Yeah, you can probably just click Cables GL down there. Yeah, and then you could just follow us. So basically, if you click Cables GL in the chat there, you can see and then click follow. So yeah, we do our best to keep everything up to date. We also have a blog on the Cables webpage. So if I go here and I go to Cables GL, we click blog. We go here, and then you can just follow all the stuff that we've been doing lately. So here we have the patch of the copycat that I did. Here we have the tutorial video. We can scroll down. We held a little Cables jam a while ago. We still have to get the prizes out. It's been kind of difficult right now with everything going on. And here you see a tutorial about the GLTF model ops. We have a meetup in Berlin, you know, and you can just scroll down and find out what we've got there. And here we also have we have categories as well. So if I click video tutorials, then I can see everything that's been done with a video tutorial. And this is the beauty of Cables. We've got interactive patches, right? You know, so you can You can just instantly try something out. You don't have to download anything and install anything. You just do this and you just try it and you're good to go, basically. Yep, no shortage of social media coverage. Okay, thank you very much for posting the links, Panda. So yeah, we're planning on doing a Twitch stream this coming Tuesday, and I hope I'm allowed to say this one right now. If all goes well, this coming Monday we'll be pushing through a big update, huge amount of features, huge amount of bug fixes, new ops, the lot basically. And if I'm correct, on Tuesday we'll be going through that, but we haven't decided yet. We're still figuring out the whole Twitch stream thing. Maybe I'll be doing another copycat, or I'll start building my VJ software. The Undev team hasn't decided what that's going to be right now. So yeah, as you can see there in the chat, you can follow the links from Panda. Like, follow us, like, subscribe, shameless self-promotion, because we love sharing cables with people and seeing what people make. So for the tutorials, follow us on YouTube, for Instagram as well. That's where we release the pretty things, the pretty selection. And we're very active on the forums. We really do our best to be if we're not in a crunch or something. So a lot of the time when people ask questions there, you will get a response from us, the developers. And because Cables is web-based, if you're going to find some bug which is like kind of critical and it slips underneath the radar, sometimes we can fix it in 5 minutes when we found it, if it's not something big. So please know that if you go to the forums and you post something there, we're going to take that seriously and we're going to do our best to get back on it. We do that as much as possible. Does anybody else have any other questions about Cables GL and Dev in general? I'm going to take that as a no. That's okay, guys. Don't worry. You don't have to say anything. Thanks for the thank you. Great. Glad you loved it. If you've not got anything to ask, that's fine. I can imagine it's a lot of information to take in when you see all of this stuff. Thanks, Sander. Yeah, I hope this has been understandable for you guys. I really did my best to break it down into simple stuff at the beginning, but then go into more advanced stuff because I just want to introduce you to concepts. Check out the YouTube channel and the example patches. We've got enough stuff. You could sit down for 12 hours a day and be clicking all this stuff and you wouldn't get through everything we've got and done, which I think is a really beautiful thing. I'd like to give a big thank you to Exploring Technology for inviting us to come and do this online workshop and give us the opportunity to introduce this to all of you. Thanks, Trevor. Glad to hear it. Tropical Trevor. Yeah, so we hope to see you making cool cables patches, publishing them. We'd like to see you on the forums. Share the things that you make. Share it if you get stuck. Just come over and join us in making some awesome, pretty things. And I'm going to wish all of you lovely people a wonderful day. And I hope with the current circumstances and the situation that you're all going to be able to find some cool technology and some stuff that you like. Hopefully Cables GL will be a part of that. And that you can then get into making some things that you want to make, because creating things is a really good, awesome thing to do. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. Big thank you to Exploring Technology, to Panda and Steam for helping me out with the chat and giving me a bit of guidance through this. And I'm going to say thank you one last time. And and thank you, Jonas, sorry, I almost forgot about that. So thanks, everybody. I hope you have a lovely day and hope to see you on the interwebs. Bye.